Okay, so of course, well, this is the name of the course that we're dealing with. The first thing we want to look at is that this is a from the course description. This is an introductory leadership course in ethics and governance. All right, so it's an at an introductory level. It's not meant to be um, a massive amount of work or very in depth, but it's supposed to give us a very good idea of a particular model of leadership that we're looking at here. It'll focus on you being able to share your personal reflections on a lot of the material that we're going to look at on and concepts, and that's going to be important because you are, if you've looked at the assignments or you remember the assignments, they are focused on the assignments are focused primarily on your own reflections of you and how your development and what your current thinking and thoughts are in relation to leadership. Um, you'll also engage in your own evaluation of your value structure and your value systems, both from a personal perspective as well as from a leadership perspective as well. And we're hoping that you will be able to apply those tools in your in decision making in the future, particularly when you come across dilemmas, and we'll be looking at that as we move forward. So, some of the course objectives, you all can go through and read these things and see what they are. But the one I want to pay attention to is this last one here: display and modifies behavior indicative of a personal philosophy of positive leadership and ethics. Now, for most of you, you have at some point in time either been the focus of behavior modification activities, or you actually um, participate in trying to modify other people's behaviors. So, how have your behaviors been modified, and what methodologies has been used in modifying your behavior in the past? Anybody?
Repetition, sir, repetition.
Repetition. Okay, that's one way of changing, right? What else? Well, as a child, how was behaviors modified by parents generally?
By negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement.
Right. In other words, katas, right?
Pretty much.
All right. So at our level now, we can't do that anymore, not so? I can't, send out a hit squad for you guys and tell you, you have to do this way and that kind of stuff. What what we've recognized
No, but
is yes. Go ahead, make your comment.
what I'm saying is sometimes personal observation could bring about a realization that,
Very good.
that
And
that is
that's
what has happened to me during adulthood.
very good. And as a result of being dealing with adults, although I mean, if you think about government and how government works, a lot of times in order to modify behaviors, they put out punitive actions, right? Like for example, in terms of trying to get people to slow down and drive more carefully, although I'm not seeing really. What did they do? They enacted a set of laws that punish people. So they've used a punitive methodology to punish a few, and then that punishment serves to change the behavior of other people in society. Not so? It's a kind of punitive thing, and it's reinforced when we start to see other people doing stuff, and then um, so that behavior modification methodology still exists and is useful and works, but that's not the type of behavior modification this course is looking for. What we're looking for is what Ms. Rollins spoke about, which is you wanting to make changes because you believe that what you're seeing will make you a better person. And that is a lofty goal or objective of any course. that we would boldly claim as course objective number 6 to display modified behaviors indicative of a personal philosophy of positive leadership and ethics. That's a massive thing. And the way in which we're hoping to do that is to intrinsically motivate you through your own self realization that to want to adopt these particular concepts and ideas in your own life's behavior. But of course, as I think Dion was saying, in order for it to stick, you have to put it into practice and repeat the activities time and time again. So that's part of the whole process that we won't be going into. Thought I'd want to draw these things to your attention so that you can pay attention to some of the things that we're trying to do. So the textbooks that we are utilizing, I've showed you them last week. They're on the e-classroom for downloading. Is the Exploring Leadership by Lucas Mahon and Comais, and the Leadership Experience by Daft. So what we're using is a combination of chapters out of both of these textbooks to look at the entire concept of leadership and ethics in our current environment. So, as I said, you don't need to go and shop for these books. They're there on the e-classroom. Feel free to look at them. Some of the chapters that we are looking at are available on YouTube as audio text. So, for those of you who might, be a bit busy and you can't actually read a chapter, you could probably look up the chapter on YouTube and probably listen to it while you're doing other things. Especially one of the ways you could do that is like if you're driving a lot and you have that traffic time, you can utilize it to listen to something maybe a little more productive than traffic. All right. All right. Any questions so far? No. Okay. So now we're gonna start looking at Unit One, Chapter One of the text. See who this is. Miss Melville. Miss Melville, welcome. Swan. All right. Okay. So this the textbooks that we're utilizing are actually going to lead us through an exploration of leadership in the current time frame that we're looking at. For us to get the Caribbean context, we are going to have to bring that to bear from our own personal explorations of our own experiences here. Now, the texts that we unfortunately we use are all American sets. Um, so we're going to start by looking at the examples laid out in their context and try to well, not broaden it, but try to take it and focus it on, well, this is what the US and in particular is looking at, or the European market looks at. How do we view the same concepts and ideas in our environments? Those are the kind of things that we want to pay attention to because um, for those of you, well, you may not be aware of this, but when this course was introduced and created in its initial iteration, it was in response to what we perceived at that time as poor leadership and ethical values in our own systems of government and governance around us in Trinidad and Tobago, both in the public and private sector. So the college decided that this was a critical thing that we wanted to try and address from a developmental area for the world around us, specifically to try and build a cadre of new leaders who will go out there with a different idea of what leadership was all about by introducing this particular model that we are going to be looking at in this course this semester. All right. So, in order for us to make it valuable and contextual, we need to bring the Caribbean context to the discussions that are taking place in the environment here. We're going to start by looking at how leadership is defined in the context of the model that we're going to be looking at. And it is defined as, well, as you can see here, it focuses on the relationship between individuals while you're trying to do something. So, leadership is a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. The focal point of this is about the nature of the relationship. Now, one of the things that you could probably look at is the nature of the relationship you've had with your own leaders as you walk through life. Think about, for example, in your earlier teaching, in your earlier school days, the type of learning that was available or took place in the classrooms with teachers with whom you enjoyed a good relationship as opposed to teachers you may not have had a very positive relationship with, and compare the outcomes that took place both from a personal perspective and and an emotional perspective as well. Think about that, because in that context you were the recipient of leadership or you were under the leadership of somebody else, and the nature of that relationship, if the relationship was adversarial, if the relationship was one of being made fun of as a subordinate in the organization or in the structure that you were operating in, you'd find that that um, that impacted either in a positive or negative way in how you responded to the subject material. I don't know if any of you all can identify with this. Can you have, in your own examples, have experienced that type of relational issue that's affecting the nature of your um, outcomes with people and situations? Anybody? No? Guys,
Can
remember?
you ex-
Go ahead.
can you explain that again? Meaning,
All right. So the focus here that I'm trying to talk about is leadership is about the nature of relationships. If And I wanted you to look at it from your own personal experience. What were the kind of relationships you had with the teachers you liked, as opposed to the relationships that you had with teachers maybe that you didn't do so well in? And what was the end result? Did you do well in the subject? Did you follow up on the subject material after you left school as a potential, area of study? What was your reaction to certain things based upon the nature of how the teachers you had in your life were? Is it clearer?
yes, it is. But it's difficult for me because I didn't like school, and there isn't a teacher that I don't know if that in the fact that I did not enjoy school influenced how I felt, but
It
I
would.
there wasn't any, but there isn't a teacher that stands out for me.
Okay, but why? So that answers a different question now. You had a problem with the
Mhm.
institution, or you just, what was the problem you had with school?
I I'm not sure. I wasn't good at at certain subjects, maths, anything mathematical, related, and
What about with
I
languages?
it was
Were you?
I didn't have a really great experience with school.
Mhm.
I it was hard to focus, and it was hard to study and do things that other people were doing.
Okay, and that obviously had an impact upon your ability to fit into the system. Yes?
Well, I didn't do well
Right, and that
academically.
right. So that's my point. My point is, if
Uh-huh.
something was affecting the relationship that you're having now, you might have had um, psychological issues that were taking place at a young age because you feared failure, um, and more importantly, somebody taught you that fear. That's something that especially when it comes to mathematics, it's one of the reasons why um, I've always said that even in secondary, in early secondaries or primary schools, you should have subject matter specialists, because if a teacher doesn't like mathematics, they will in fact teach that feeling to their students. I don't know if you would agree with me with that. It's something I've had a long-standing issue with in terms of a lot of teachers who are uncomfortable with mathematics teach that uncomfortableness with the subject matter, which leads to the kind of issues that you talked about. Because you're not unique in that sense, Ms. Rollins, because a lot of us, even myself, grew up with a fair of different subject material because of some external activity that was taking place, and a lot of times it had to do with the nature of the teacher. So, for example, when I was in school, I did well in mathematics up until third form.
So
Um,
it could also be to with the negative reinforcement if you don't get it.
yes, yes, that is also part of the problem as well. But I'll tell you what took place for me. Welcome, Miss Chelsea. Um, was that up to Form 3, I had teachers who were, well, a teacher or a couple of teachers in mathematics who were really good, and they in fact liked the subject material. But when we got into Form 4 and 5, we got into these streamlined classes, and that lecturer, that teacher, I can't. He wasn't a bad person, but a he knew his mathematics well, but he was a poor teacher in terms of being able to pass the information along to other people. And I kind of fell apart in my mathematics. And I remember right up to my mock exam before I wrote my O levels, I failed my mock exam. I remember distinctly I got 33 out of 100 in my mock exam. And I swore I was going to fail that subject. But what I did do is I found another teacher in the extramural system who was really good with his mathematics, and he enjoyed showing us all those little things about mathematics that math lecturers like to do. And attending his classes was actually a better experience. And through the work he did, I was able to um, um, I was successful in getting done with mathematics when I was finished with it. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you evaluate the areas in your life where you've excelled and done well in the past, and even the places and things you like to do now, focus on the nature of the relationship you're having with the people there. Now, you could already be in a leadership position, and I want you to think about what you are bringing to that process as a leader or as a subordinate. If you are, well, if you, particularly if you're in a leadership position, what are you bringing to that relationship? The quality of that relationship is going to directly impact upon the 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 success and the longevity of the relationship that you're looking at there. That makes sense now? Um, Anybody else? Rollins in particular?
Yes.
Yeah?
Basically,
Okay.
how,
Hmm.
yeah, putting it a different way, how I react or behave in that process can, you know, make things positive and bring about positive results.
Right. And the experience can be a rewarding one as opposed to one that's demeaning or otherwise negative. All right. Now, the reason why I
Okay.
brought school into the picture and teachers in particular is that I wanted you to be able to look at the nature of the type of relationships you had, to understand how why this definition of leadership being relational in nature is so critical. It's the cornerstone of the whole model that we're going to look at, because we're going to spend a lot of time focused on what we do as a leader, and that's going to be important for us to pay attention to. Okay, the
So,
whole crux of
can I
that.
ask a question?
Of course, you can.
Is that are you speaking about that from a leadership perspective, or anybody in a group activity, regardless of who the leader is,
Okay, you're kind of broke.
can
You're kind of breaking up through your question, so ask it again.
yes, what you're saying, does it apply strictly to the leader of a group, or what is it that you're saying that regardless of who you are or how, whatever position you are in the group, you can bring about positive change?
Yes, but it's more critical for the leader.
I see. Okay.
Yes, on both sides. The participants, if they are
Hmm.
negative, can impact upon the whole situation or the experience, but the responsibility and of the leader is greater in defining the relationship. Um, so it's sort of like when I start when I teach classes. If I come into a class and the first thing I do is walk into the class, bang my books around, and yell at somebody, hey, stand up straight, or that kind of stuff, that starts to set a tone, doesn't it? It starts to develop or set the
Hmm.
relationship up that is likely to happen. Students are going to be on guard, they're going to be quiet, they're not going to be willing to share and say things because they feel as if they will get some form of negative activity as somebody keeps on talking about. I think it's Owen. He keeps on saying about the negative reinforcement. If I'm going to get negative types of reactions to my behavior, then I'm going to shut down and I'm going to not do as much because I just don't want to be noticed, right? So the importance of the leader in the organization cannot be understated because they sort of lead us into the relationship and they lead us into the circumstances. So it is critical and important as a leader to to create the foundation that we want to encourage. But as we'll see, that different circumstances utilize different methodologies. So that makes sense. You're following what we're talking about there? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, I believe so.
All right. Okay. I hope other people are also seeing that. Okay. So leadership and how we view leadership is it changes based upon the frameworks we look at them from. So the first framework that we most often think of leadership is through politics. So politics is about how we use power and how we take that power and influence others. So that when we start to think of it, when of course from the minute you start to say leadership or leaders, you start to think about political leadership. So here we have probably three people who have perceived power, and therefore their power influences people. Now, the the situation is such that each of these individuals here is impacting either in a positive or negative way in the world environment. Now, I've chosen these guys because these guys represent very powerful influences in the world around us. All right. In our local context, um, who could we replace these people with?
The prime minister,
The prime minister.
essentially.
Well, not only him, because you have to think about leadership doesn't operate in a vacuum, but it'll be the prime
So the
minister
opposition leader.
and the opposition leader, correct? Those are the individuals who kind of fall into those situations. Miss Gonzalez, welcome. Well, she's still coming. Miss Gonzalez, welcome.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you very
Hi.
much.
No worries. We are um, kind of in the midst of things here. All right. Recording's going too. All right. Okay, so yes, if we were to look at the local context, we would replace these particular leaders with our prime minister, the president, the leader of the opposition. Um, the if we extend it now across the judiciary and we start to think about the chief justice, all those individuals fall into the leadership of our country, and they therefore would be considered the influential individuals in our society. Other influential individuals that might take precedent closer to home would be their parents, for example. All right, they are in fact the first leaders of the country. So this was the 2023, and this was late 2023 in September. This was the G2, the G20 summit, and you'd see all of the various leaders here. Now, what exactly takes place at these summit meetings? We hear about them a lot, and we hear a lot of people having problems at these meetings. What do you think the function and purpose of these things are? Why do world leaders get together and meet? Any of you all were alive when we had the we had a summit here in Trinidad?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
the Chugam.
Shogam, yes, you remember that? All right.
And there was
So
one before it as well.
there were two summits that same in that same time. We hosted two different bodies meeting at that period of time. What do you think the function of those things were? Well, the G20
I
summit is
I don't know.
usually about the world leaders getting together to make policy decisions at the top level that will guide the behaviors of the lower technocrats in the countries in terms of trade. In this case here, they did a lot on climate change issues, carbon emissions, those kind of things. They are trying to tackle those big problems that the world is facing. Resource allocation, even COVID came up as well as during this as well, because I want to repeat that worldwide pandemic situation that took place there. Not that they want to prevent it, but you know, there was a lot of spill-on effect from that some countries are still feeling to this day. So when we think about leadership, one of the first concepts we always think about is political leadership. But when we're talking about political leadership, what we're really talking about is how people get power and how they use that power to influence others to do what they want to do. All right. Another area or field that we look at leadership from is from the view of management. So when we think of an organization or corporation, we think about the management in our organizations. Now, the difference here, however, is that in the management perspective, it is focused on using the relationship between supervisors and subordinates or leaders and followers with the outcome being profitability. So management is only effective if the organization is profitable. All right. So yeah, we have to understand from this perspective. For any of you who are working in a profit-oriented business place, if the organization is making profit, then management is doing well. But if the organization is making losses, then it is not, and and that therefore impacts upon how we look at the effectiveness of that leader. So, for example, if we look at these group of individuals here, all of these are seen as good leaders, successful leaders. And what makes them successful is that they have made millions, and in most cases here, billions of dollars in profits in their operations and activities. And that's what this focus is going to be about. All of these individuals here, how many of these people do you recognize? I know some of the Asian people you might not think, some of the others look quite easily.
23, huh? Jay-Z, Oprah, Zucker.
Not, I didn't hear the last person. Jay
Ma,
Z.
hello, was it president?
No, no, I'm not hearing you clearly. That's the thing.
She says Zuckerberg's.
Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg. All right, cool. Those are the only people you recognize.
So I recognize everybody except about three of them.
Yeah, me too. Yes,
Yeah, I
anybody?
recognize everybody.
Um,
Oh, you want to hear them?
yeah, I want to hear who knows who. Who did
Oh,
you
well,
recognize
Warren
there?
Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Jay-Z, Oprah, Jack Ma, he owned Tencent. Um, I think the Chinese lady there is like the head of the World Economic Forum there behind her.
Correct.
I knew a few, but I know two of them I don't know.
All right.
Two,
So you know who this guy is?
yeah, right, Bill Gates. Everybody know
Right.
Bill
Okay.
Gates.
And this guy here.
Yeah, that is Richard Branson. That is Virgin
Right.
Atlantic or whatever.
Okay. What about this guy here?
Yeah, well, like Elon Musk.
Right. But not this guy, right?
Um, I saw his face before, but I don't remember his name.
Mhm. And that's the thing. The only reason why we would recognize these individuals, that's the point I'm trying to say or make, is that the reason why these people have risen to become leaders in the management area is because they've done something and they've been successful at it. That's the effectiveness of being an effective manager means you make money. Um, and we would see that that's not the only element that we want to be looking at. All right, so moving along, another framework that we look at leadership through is through the lens of anthropology. Now let me just read the statement here and then we'll discuss this. Anthropology views leadership via an examination of cultural influences, language, tools, and such factors as symbols and norms in our past. Now, so as the word suggests, leadership is something that we can look back on by evaluating what was taking place in the past, to evaluate how leaders rose, which leaders did what. I'm just answering a chat. Chelsea, your mic's not working.
Yes, sir, but time experiment, but interrupt.
No, you stop and ask the questions, not worry yourself. All right. Okay. So when we think about anthropology, these are some of the areas of anthropological research we're looking at: archaeology, linguistics, applied anthropology, physical anthropology, cultural. So whenever we come across, so the question to me would be, or to you would be, if we were going to be looking back 1,000 years from now at leadership and in our society today, 1,000 years into the future, what would we find? What tools would we find that would tell us about the nature of leadership um, at this point in time if we were somewhere in the future? Now we can't. It's kind of a difficult thing, but that's what anthropology does. Anthropology evaluates societies in the past to work out how their systems in their lives worked, um, by gathering information about them through their archaeology, looking at their language usage, looking at their physical makeup and their bone structure and stuff like that, to work out what was happening with these people. Um, so archaeological digs, for example, one of the things that they're always looking at is trying to decipher what was taking place in that society by looking at their ability to record their history. And that record of history is something that helps us to determine what was taking place from a leadership perspective. How did they arrive at their positions, or how did people arrive in positions of leadership, and how did people operate in it? So Any of you all looked at that film many years ago? It was done ooh, by Mel Gibson. Um, I think it's not Apocalypse. I think it's Apocalypse.
Braveheart.
No, not Braveheart. No, it
So
was not
apocalypse.
Calypso.
Apocalypto. Anybody ever looked at
Apocalypse,
it?
yeah.
Yeah, ever looked
Yes,
at it?
Yes.
yes.
Yes, sir.
Right. That is like a journey backwards in time, looking at the coming of the white men as the Europeans as they did there, because that's what ended it. But look at that society that he was examining there, in terms of the leaders. The leaders in that society started off, when we met the characters of that story, started off with the leader of the hunt, with the best hunter became a leader in the village. Why? Because of the critical nature of getting food. Correct. You all remember the big strong guy who they were making fun of. For those of you who are familiar with the story, if you haven't, it's a good movie to go and look back on. It's funny as hell, but also is quite quite eye-opening
So
and
they was making
violent.
fun of him because not necessarily because of how he was, but because he was the nano children.
Right.
If you're watching it properly, yeah.
Correct. Yes. They were making fun of him because he didn't have children. They played pranks on him by telling him he has to rub this on his penis and all kind of thing. And then of course he started to burn whatever they gave him to rub, burnt the living daylights out of him and the wife. So the two of them were squatting in the water and all kind of thing, and they were just cracking up and laughing and all that kind of stuff. So again, if we look back, therefore, you can't become a leader in their society if you can't produce children, because the production of children requires or ensures your survival as a race moving forward. But as the story progressed and they were taken over by another tribe and they were captured, you start to meet different sets of leaders who were religious in nature, and their religion required blood sacrifice. Remember that? And of course, then there was also the warrior element as well, where you had the the strongest warriors who were able to kill, without compunction in their societies. So if you look at that, um, it gave a perspective of what leadership. I mean, if we looked at it from the leadership perspective, we can actually see how people ended up in leadership positions in those particular societies and what they had to do to stay there. If we were to look back at our time frame now, and 1,000 years from now, what would we find here? How was our leadership determined? I remember looking at a film where this alien came down to, I can't remember the name of the film, but it was really funny. You know, they 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 looked at a film in which, or they captured our television airwaves, and they worked out that we chose our leaders of the world, by beauty contests, because they were picking up these broadcasts of like Miss World and Miss Universe and that kind of stuff. Those titles were being given to people based upon how well they looked and how big their bottom was. And I thought it was a really curious, not curious, but really um, interesting way that of how our perception could be um, set up by what we what happens there. But if you think about it, leadership in our democratic societies is developed through voting. And with voting means popularity, or those individuals in power are able to gather as much support as possible for their position and point of view. So that's something that we can think about from that perspective as well. So that's what anthropology is all about. Now, another way in which we can look at leadership is through history. And from a historical position, we could look at how people rose to significant positions of leadership based upon what they were doing during critical situations or times in the history of the world. So, for example, these gentlemen here all rose or became very important in history because of the roles they played during that time. If it wasn't for Hitler, these people would have been just, regular leaders. You're all recognize these people, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, the most evil man in history.
Well, at
Some,
the,
there's some.
go ahead, go ahead, Justin.
No, I'm just saying, not everybody is the same views on. Most people have a negative view on these people, but
Well, not all of them actually. In
correct.
fact, if you remember the outcome of the war, all right, at at the point of the war, everybody, these three guys, one, two, three over here, got together to beat up this fella and his ideas. This is Hitler. This guy is Stalin, Joseph Stalin. And what ended up happening was that these two guys, at the end of the war, when they were kind of splitting up the spoils, so to speak, these two guys, along with some of the other countries, kind of ostracized um, Stalin because they didn't quite agree with the communist, well, can call that a communist system he had set up there, which led off on the Cold War that came up after World War II between the Soviet Union and especially the United States and Britain, all right, or the Western world as opposed to the Soviet bloc. So that led to that whole distinction there. But they became important and critical because of the roles that they played in the history. Look at this gentleman. Anybody recognizes him?
Martin Luther
Everybody
King,
supposed to know that face, sir.
You should, and in what context?
Um,
fighting for
yes, sir.
us.
Yeah.
All right, civil rights movements, correct?
Correct.
All right. What about this gentleman? And I
Um,
deliberately chose this
No.
photo. You all don't know this guy?
That's JJ from Good Times, sir.
No, sir.
I'm just kidding. I just kidding. I just kidding.
JJ from Good Time. Nah, JJ was much uglier than this guy.
He's a Trinidadian.
He is a Trinidadian, correct. What's his name?
Stokely,
Stokely
I
Carmichael.
think.
Stokely
Right.
Carmichael, that's correct. This was when he was very young, when he first started to attend the university and started to become very active. He changed his name actually. What's his name now? Anybody? Kwame
I don't
Ture?
know. It's an
I
African
never
name.
knew him back then, so I definitely don't know him now.
No. But again, this is the whole point of history. He rose to power as into prominence, especially back at this point in time. His name was Carmichael Stokely, but what he did do during this period of what he would refer to as recognize realization and sort of renewal, what he did is he changed his name to an African name, Kwame Ture, and he became the voice of the younger generation of civil rights movements, especially in the colleges. And he actually brought that to Trinidad in the form of the Black Power movement. Um, if you actually want to see some a little bit, any of you all ever looked at a film called The Black Klansman? Giving you
yes,
all
sir.
some right. Black Klansman, the Black Klansman actually featured his character and some of his story in it.
Serious.
Well, who was the person they were guarding?
Oh, okay, okay. I didn't really.
Pay
I've watched it, but I
attention.
didn't really.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
The focus was the fact that a black guy was part of the KKK, but
yeah.
who were they guarding? What was their focus of protection? Go back and look at it now with that mind frame, and you'd see the connections I was talking about. All right, because that was actually where he had started to get very popular, and the KKK were using him because he was attacking what they call Jim Crow law and that type of stuff. Those
So,
are
so
kind
he,
of
that guy in the Black Klansman was actually Trinidadian. That's what you say?
no, no, no. The black guy, no. The actor,
Oh,
no.
no, no,
We
no, no,
just
no. Not the actor. I mean, like referencing him. Like
uh
he went. Remember, it was based on a true story.
it
So I
is
want to
based
know.
on a true story. The
Right. So I
guy,
want to know if the guy was Trinidadian.
They mean the actor who played Carmichael Stokey
No, not the actor, so the real person, the real person who they were. Um,
portraying in the movie.
yeah,
I mean, all right. So is it the main protagonist or is it just the person they were protecting that you're talking about?
the main protagonist. Main
Nah, they were
protagonist.
Americans. Remember they
Okay.
he was part of the is it not the FBI and
Yes, so one
he
of them. Yeah, he was part of that.
right
So I
and
just
they
wanted, like, I wanted
right
to know
so
if that main character was based on a person, well, the real
no
person who was from
because all
Trinidad.
right so remember what they did was they found this plot to assassinate this guy and they infiltrated the KKK utilizing that um, that inadvertent um, slip where they made him a member, not knowing that he wasn't black. Go back and look at the movie. So far, I've given you all two movies to go and look at. Huh? Remember, that's your homework, okay? What's the first movie?
Apocalypto.
Right. Go and look at that, and then go and look at the
Black
Black
Klansman.
Klansman. So far, all right. So if we look at from a historic point of view, all of these people here have had an impact on the history of the world in some form or other, and therefore they are looked up upon as being influential leaders in history. All right. Now, how many of these do? Now, I'm not putting this up to show anybody up, but how many of these people do you recognize?
So a good bit.
Yeah, a good few,
Yeah, a
right?
lot. Yeah, a lot.
All
So.
right. Some of the more obtrusive ones might be like this guy here. You might know him. This guy here walking with a stick. This gentleman over here might be a little thing. This guy here might be a little hazy. Um,
Now, so he is the one who launched the atomic bomb. He was a president. He do the atomic bomb.
uh-huh. All right, guys, give me 1 second here. I have an interruption, and I'll be back in a minute. Sorry about that, guys. Thanks for indulging me. I have a bit of a personal emergency going on home here, but I have to get this organized here. Yes, you said this guy was the guy who launched atomic bombs. Somebody was
Yes, so well,
talking.
he looked like him.
He looked like him. Yes, he is actually as Khrushchev. Next to him, interestingly though, they put the picture of. Do you recognize this guy here, Gorbachev?
NASA, NASA.
You
Yes.
don't remember, right? So he was the prime minister or the premier, or whatever, of Russia just before,
Putin.
um, not Putin, the guy before Putin, that led to the fall of the Soviet Union. In essence, basically,
Upchenikov. What is it? Upchenikov or something.
I can't remember his name, but I've seen his face, and I don't know why his picture is not here. Because between the two of them, they brought the Soviet Union out of the of socialism and into the democracy and kind of the madness that they are now under.
Democracy, sir.
I no, that's not a
That's
democracy.
funny.
That is not a democracy. I'm telling you that. That
Boris
with
Yeah, but
Yeltsin.
now I was saying it's
Yeltsin,
not a
that's it.
democracy.
Boris Yeltsin, that's the guy. Him and Boris Yeltsin had because they transitioned from Gorbachev to him, and he was probably and related to him was this guy where it is Ronald Reagan, because he was president at that point in time in the United States when Gorbachev was president in Russia, and it was through them that they kind of worked their way through that thing, and the walls came down and all that kind of nonsense took place.
Yeah.
But the U.S. still had a problem with this gentleman over here, and never let up.
Fidel.
Yeah, Mr. Castro, and they still having issues. I don't. They're real jealous about what's taking place there. All right. Okay, so again, we could look at a million pictures of people and leaders from the past and look at the influence they've had on our lives as leaders moving forward and in any field. So, for example, the music field and the acting field, we'd have these people here, the Beatles and Elvis Presley, and we have Marilyn Monroe. They all had major influences on music and film and well, women in film as well. Those are huge things that we want to pay attention to. But again, the whole concept now is when we look at leadership through the framework of history, it looks at what people did during specific times of history and how what they did influence what we do now and how we think now. That's the kind of things that we're looking at. So one of the final areas that we want to look at in terms of the frameworks of how we look at leadership is through the frameworks of psychology and sociology. Psychology looks at the behavior of individuals. Sociology looks at us of looks at us in the form of groups and society, and we look at the way we behave and the way we behave with each other. So that actually is going to be an important area because a lot of the theory that comes up in our model that we're going to look at is going to borrow from both sociology and psychology. It's going to feature a lot of work coming from these gentlemen here. So you have Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, and B.F. Skinner. All three of these individuals had a lot of input into the model that we're going to look at, and these are the different theories that we're going to be looking at in the context of this particular model. So we have to look at all, and we're going to be evaluating them as we move forward, going on. All right. So one of the questions that we have to look at is, how does your field of study look at leadership? So we have a lot of radiographers here. Well, do we? Is this class one that's full of radiography of people, or just a few? Because I know I have a couple that have a lot of radiography.
Yes, sir. There's a class.
This is the class. So how does radiography look at leadership? I don't want to say look at, but how do people arrive in leadership positions in the radiography field?
Fight them each other, theory cheat up.
Yeah, we know what it's
Do they have the radiology arena?
Yes.
That's what you say. No.
Okay.
Who ends up in positions of leadership in that?
I would
mostly
say
it's service.
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
experience service. Yeah.
It's experience and service, and of course expertise and skill. Yes, and study as well. Not so.
Well, not in this field like that. So mostly is experience.
Yeah, yeah, because it takes time to develop your skills, right?
Yes.
Hmm. All right. What are the fields we have here? I think we have a number of management students here. How does how do people arrive in positions of leadership in the management field? Miss Rollins, you're in the management field.
You're calling on me?
I'm calling on you,
Oh,
making you out.
okay. Well, basically from by experience. This is, of
Really?
course, in addition to yeah,
Hmm. Okay. Experience and
you get your qualifications, you get a job, and you're some people they join in a management position, but experience has a large
hmm.
part to do with that.
All right. So no, this is going to be a different question because one of the other areas that we can look at in terms of where leadership comes up from the same program of study you're doing is how does entrepreneurship look at leadership?
Um,
Not, you don't have to answer this. We could open this up to other people who are
okay.
studying BBAs in business and administration and entrepreneurship. By now, some of you all must have done some of your entrepreneurial studies. How has leadership arrived at in those fields? Don't make go on the list and call names, you know. Michael, what program are you doing? Mackenzie. I see a mic coming on, but not hearing you. All right. Oh no, Justin is a radiographer. All right. Dion, tell me about the mass communications area.
So, to be honest, I've never thought about leadership in mass comm,
Uh huh.
but
But it's more along the lines of an organization, right? Like a management organization. Those
um,
those people rising to positions of power, those who have been able to gather influence. So it's almost political in nature.
yeah,
Yeah. And they arrive in positions of influence because they have shown some level of prowess within the field.
yeah, and influence too.
Yeah. Okay. But entrepreneurship is different because what makes for a lot of the very popular leaders, if you think of like Bill Gates, for example, and this other guy, um, the fellow from Apple, Wayne, Jobs, right?
Steve.
Steve Jobs, and even Mark Zuckerberg. They never finished school, so it's not always going to be the idea of qualifications and that type of stuff, but it's going to be about whose idea became the biggest, was able to capture the most amount of interest in the world around us. So, computers, software, Facebook, all those kind of things shows you that leadership can also come up in the form of people with ideas, and which is another element that we could look at in relation to how leadership comes up. So that's how that works out. Those people in those fields initially, I guess, you arrive into a position of leadership because you are the person with the best idea. So it's almost, as some people say, like a pure type of activity that's going on there. Interesting concept. Any other fields of study here? Accounting folks, for example. Any accounting people here?
I sir, I'm an accounting person.
Yeah, so you know, honestly, who's that speaking, Maria?
Andrew?
He, Mr. Hero. You know, you sound like an accountant. Have you been doing accounting for a long time?
No, but it honestly feels like it.
All right. So again, in the accounting field, people rise into position based upon their qualifications, and of course, you know, setting up a service and kind of running a business successfully also would help you do that as well. But within an accounting organization, those with qualifications and skill levels and seniority tend to get um, into those positions of power. Interesting. All right. Okay. So let's start to look at the relational leadership model. So the model we are looking at in this from this textbook is going to be the relational leadership model, which eventually gets shortened in the text to the RLM model. And it's what it does is that it borrows a lot from psychology and educational theory, and it kind of combines a lot of the stuff that it's taking from there to develop the framework for the model that we're going to be looking at. So that framework is going to start with these particular requirements. You have to be, in order to become, based upon this thinking here, to become a good leader, you need to first know who you are. So learning about who you are is going to be important. Not only do you have to understand who you are from your own perspective, but you also have to understand how other people see you. You have to become self aware in the context of others, understanding your own personal values and beliefs and commitments. So, these three things are really important for the beginning of the process. Because for you to be able to um, really come to grips with the relational leadership program or model, the model says the first thing you have to do is understand yourself, which is what the first presentation of the chapter presentations from the class is going to start with. Um, is going to start with that understanding self. All right. And then the second part, self awareness in the context of others, is understanding others. That's the second one. All right. So you'd see that a lot of the framework is going to be dealt with chapter by chapter to kind of flesh it out. These are going to be some of the things that you all are going to be getting into in more detail in the other chapters that follow. All right. So when you're developing your leadership potential, it requires the development of self awareness, effective listening, collaboration, compromise, and practice. So I want to. So this is fairly straightforward. Most of us know these things, but I want to just clarify something. We have a communication major among us, so I want to ask the question generally, and if he feels up to it, Dion, you can answer the question. What is effective listening?
When you say, so what is effective at listening?
Listening, yes.
I would say from my, um, I would say is interpretate good interpretation of um, what is being communicated,
Okay,
a
so
proper interpretation of what is being communicated.
from whose perspective, though?
Yeah, from the listener.
Really? Okay, okay. Uh, to be an effective listener, what must the listener do? What must they do in themselves? And
With
this,
themselves. Oh,
yes, in yourself, what must you do if you have to effectively listen to somebody else? Now, I don't want to
be
just.
willing to be objective.
Okay, so what does that mean? Objective. You're close onto what I'm trying to get to. Um,
To be impartial, to be
hmm
like you don't, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
it right there, you know. You get right
Pay
So,
attention.
so is it a four-letter word?
there.
Yeah, I would say to pay attention. You know, be
Yeah.
able to.
Give the undivided attention. Show
Those
that you're listening. Provide
right.
feedback.
Provide feedback, yes. But what one of the most important elements, and Dion is so close, it was there, right at the tip of his tongue. You have to suspend something. You
Your
have,
belief or
yes,
your
there
own
you go.
opinions on the
Correct.
opinions here.
You have to
on what is
suspend
being said.
your own value judgment when you're listening to somebody to be able to listen to them effectively. That is the biggest challenge of effective listening, because if you are listening with the goal of giving feedback, then you are not, because you're not really listening to the person, because you're just listening to them from the context of just, I have to talk back and say something, so I have to be able to assess and evaluate. But to effectively listen to somebody, the first thing you have to do is called suspension of judgment. You have to stop judging the person, especially when they're speaking to you about things that you have strong opinions about. And a lot of us, a lot of people the world over do not effectively listen, especially when they start to hear um, somebody from a different camp, from your own thinking positions, um, begin to speak, and they start to talk about something that you have almost a gut impact with. You stop listening altogether. One of the ways to practice that is go and listen to talk radios, where you have people calling in and literally talking sometimes a pile of rubbish. But listen to what and try to practice that effective listening. I know my ex-wife used to feel like this all the time because she used to yell at me all the time. Why are you listening to this damn shit? They're talking the same rubbish day after day. I said because I'm practicing things, right? Well, she's my ex-wife, so I guess I wasn't listening properly. Oh Lord. So, um, so yes, but effectively listening to somebody else is one of the most critical skills you have to develop. Self awareness comes with time and realization and willingness to evaluate yourself. Collaboration starts with effective listening because you have to be able to listen to somebody to be able to work with them. Compromising is now some people look at compromise as a weakness, but no, compromise is a strength as a leader because you can't get your own way all the time. You have to give and take in order to do it. And of course, putting all these things into practice is part of the things that you're going to have to be doing all the time. Now, foundation principles continued. Some of the things that we have to bear in mind that is going to be the reality of leadership is that leadership concerns us all. Now, when we're younger, um, we never liked to pay attention to, like, for instance, when I used to hate the news. I don't know about you. Um, I remember in my house, we used to have to sit and wait for your parents to listen to the news, and then you could look at TV or worse yet, make noise, play games, and that kind of stuff. Um, and the reason for that is because they were looking at the news because they were trying to pay attention to what was taking place and what the government was doing and so on. For me as a child, growing up, that was like the worst thing. And you all do the same thing now. As when's the last time any of you all listened to a budget speech? Now I'm talking to a much older audience here, so some of you might very well be, you know, go out of your way. Hey, I need to listen to the budget speech, or at least read the budget speech and that kind of stuff. So, so some intruders in my house. um, So, yeah, but how many of you all, when's the last time any of you all listened to a budget speech? The last one that took place last year. Any of you?
So to be honest,
today.
I hear some budget from other people, like my parents and stuff. I don't personally listen to it.
What degree are you doing, Jada?
A BA in accounting.
You don't have BA in accounting, and you don't. Oh my God, you're killing me.
Yes, but just to sit through a budget, just hear from other people.
Oh my God. That I have.
So I
And
did listen to the budget. So hashtag not all accountants.
right, okay, yes, but no, I'm just amused that but I no, but the point I'm trying to make is that as we get older, we begin to appreciate the importance of it. Um, and a lot of people in society look at the leadership around us and they think that's big people thing, that's them people thing. It doesn't matter to me. At the end of the day, it really does matter to me because what they decide impacts directly upon what happens in my life. That's the point I'm trying to make, which is why it's a foundation principle of the leadership program that we must realize that leadership concerns us all, right? The second point, it's viewed and valued differently by all. Yes, for some people, they would look upon it as being something of, not importance, and is valued less. And we have to appreciate that. As a leader, you have to understand that people don't all look towards leadership as necessarily good. necessarily useful. That's another thing, that kind of stuff. You ever heard this saying, boss is like a diaper, always up your ass and full of shit? That's the kind of, those things come from those varying varying ideas of valuing leadership in one way or the other. So those are things. Another element here, static as opposed to no, flexible or dynamic as opposed to being static. I like the way they use the term flexible in the textbook rather than static or dynamic, because flexible means that there are some elements that have to hold, but it has to be able to bend a bit back and forward. All right, and therefore has to be able to adjust to whatever modern changes are taking place in society around us. But there is some core element that has to remain there, and those are some of the things that we have to pay attention to. Different types of settings call for different types of leadership, and that is true. We're going to be looking at that as well. And the most important principle is the principle that leadership can be learned and developed. You're not born leaders. This is one of the first things that we're going to be getting away from. The fact that a lot of people believe you have to be born leaders. You might be born into privilege, but it doesn't necessarily make you into a leader. All right. Okay. All right. So now a couple of other things that are required for the development of leadership. It requires a commitment to the highest ethical standards to encourage change and social responsibility. Now, we're going to come back and talk about those things later on. But it requires the development of critical thinking, which is one of the reasons why you're doing degrees, because it's hoped that in those degrees you develop critical thinking, credibility, authenticity, integrity, and high levels of ethical conduct. Now, these are things that these are words: critical thinking, credibility, authenticity, integrity. These are words that are thrown around a lot, but we have to come to appreciate the real importance of these things, because what you do as a leader sits upon these cornerstones, and your success as a leader is dependent upon your ability to utilize these tools and have, but the three that you have to pay attention to the most is credibility, authenticity, and integrity. And they all sit upon your ethical values. All right. Your critical thinking is more of an intellect thing, where you're able to take information, break it down, situations, circumstances, and that kind of stuff. But your credibility and authenticity is based upon your behavior, and those things are, well, they always say, um, your reputation is something that takes a long time to be built, but could be broken down in in a very short space of time. Because all people need to see you do is fail once, and that's it. You've lost a lot of credibility and authenticity. So it's something that you have to pay attention to developing in terms of your your body of skills, or your foundation for leadership. So something I cannot tell you how important that is. All right. So the three basic principles that we're going to be looking at in the developmental process of your leadership thing is starts with the knowing yourself, knowing how change occurs, knowing how and why others may view things differently to you. That's the first part. Developing a sense of knowing in these areas, knowing who you are, knowing how things change and why things change, knowing how and why others see things differently. And that's probably the most difficult thing. Because a lot of us, we can get to the point where we think we know ourselves quite well. We understand the process of change, but we have problems trying to work through why are the people not seeing things my way. And that requires a lot more effort. We need to well, I don't say we, but you in particular need to develop the ability to understand others to the point that you can, basically the phrase is walk a mile in their shoe, basically. because you need to understand why other people are not seeing things the way you are. Because if you were trying to bring them around to your point of view, you have to understand why other people are seeing things differently. That's a perception issue, and there's an exercise here I'd like to get into. What are you guys seeing here? Let me just turn off my camera a bit, so y'all can focus on this. What are you guys seeing here?
A lady staring at the camera.
Uh-huh. What else does it look like?
A skull.
A
Right,
skeleton.
right.
Yeah.
Well, a skull, not necessarily a skeleton, but a skull at least. Everybody seeing that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Right,
Yes,
good.
yes, sir.
Good, good, good. All right, let's look at this one. So, what do you see?
Sadly, a woman.
A woman
Yes.
sitting down.
A old woman, what? Is she looking up? She looking down? What's she doing?
From the side.
She's looking down?
Yeah, that's actually looking loud.
All right. Anybody seeing a young lady looking over her shoulder?
Yes, sir. I'm seeing a young
Yes,
lady.
sir. Yes, sir. It's me
All
and
right. So
you.
the person who's seeing the
Yes,
young
sir.
lady looking over her shoulder, can you see the old woman looking down?
No.
Yes, I saw it after when you mentioned.
All right. Everybody's seeing two different images in this one image, or some people not seeing
I
it.
only see
I'm
one.
only seeing one.
Which one are you seeing?
The woman
Okay, I
looking
started to see
down.
the old lady. Yeah, I started to see the old lady.
All right. Okay. Good.
The young lady black hair is her forehead, but like a coat covering her forehead,
All
and
right.
the chin is the nose. So
All
that
right.
is how you see it. Yeah.
Okay. Who's not seeing that still?
Me.
Yes,
Who's
sir.
not?
I'm seeing it.
Look
All right.
like
So,
a real old lady.
right, like a witch.
Yes.
Lawrence, so you're seeing both images, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Everybody's seeing both images.
Yes, sir.
All right.
No,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So who's not seeing the both images? Let's talk to them.
I'm not seeing
What you're not seeing?
a young lady.
You're not seeing the young lady. Okay. So follow my mouse and pay attention to this. This is a nose. This is an eyelash. This is the hair on her head. This is her chin coming down here. This is her ears. This is a choker she has across her neck. This is her coat, the black stuff. And she has a shawl coming over the top of her head and a flower, or a feather, I should say, curled out of the front of it. Are you seeing that?
Yes, I see that one.
Right, that's the young lady looking over her shoulder. Are you seeing the old lady looking down?
No.
Okay, so close your eyes. Don't look at it. All right, so now open your eyes and look at it from this way. This hair is the woman's nose, the old lady's nose. This is one eye, this is a second eye. This is her hair hanging over the front of her face. Coming back to the chin now, this is her mouth and her chin all the way down here. And this is her mouth here. And she has a head tie around her hair. You seen that yet?
Oh, I
No,
see it
sir.
now.
You seen this? This is a nose hair. And this here is her coat behind her. And all of this is her face. And this is her mouth hair. These are her eyes. This and this here. This is, you just seeing the eyelash because her nose so big that you only see the eyelash come over. This is the other eye here. This is the front of her hair.
Yes, I now see it.
All right. See, takes time to see what other people see. Everybody's seeing the two people now, the two ladies. There are lots of these
Yeah.
types of perception exercises you see coming up online. You could try them just to get yourself accustomed to them. This is one that always happens to us. You all understand what's happening here?
Yes, sir.
Hmm. This happens to us a lot because we don't. If he walked around to where that guy is standing, he would see what he's seeing. And that I found this was really good in pointing out the whole reason why we need to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes to really understand their perception, because we are only looking at it from one perspective, our perspective. And if we don't realize that other perspectives exist, then we're going to run into that problem of not understanding why other people are behaving the way they do. Okay? It's something that you want to spend some time with. All right, so that's the knowing element. The being element. If we are going to become um, good leaders, effective leaders, we must be, they focus on the word being, ethical, principled, open, caring, and inclusive. All right, so ethical we can understand, principle comes from that. What about open? What does that mean? Open, caring, and inclusive. Ms.
Being
Rambolia?
able to share,
Being able to, when you say share, share what?
like personal experience,
You
things
think,
in your
you think,
life.
all right, so you think that's what open means? That as a leader, you need to be ethical, principled, open, caring, and inclusive?
So I believe is what we speak about earlier with
Which, which is?
like being objective and stuff like that. So
Being not it's not objective, being non-judgmental.
non-judgmental, yeah,
Yeah.
non-judgmental. Yeah.
Okay. So all right. So the person who was speaking before, let me get back to her. Who was that?
Sharing, so
Shireen. So when we say open, we what we're saying is that openness means we are open to other positions, other points of view. That makes better sense.
yes, sir.
That's what we mean. And more importantly, even though they are other positions and other points of views that I may or may not have known about, I still care about those people and I bring them into my fold, which is the inclusivity. The challenge is going to be open, especially if we have very close perspectives in our thinking. And it challenges us when we come across situations where we are going to be looking at things from a very well, I want to use the word, when people come to us in an organization or in a circumstance where they challenge some of your very basic belief structures. All right. One of the ways you could see this working is if you are the leader in an organization and you have openly gay individuals working with you, how would you still care and be inclusive for them, or will your own value system, your own judgment, push them to the peripherals of your organization? That's something that as a leader you have to be aware of. That your opinion about things, you have to be open, and when we say be open, it's open to everybody. All right. And you have to care about those individuals and try to include them, not try to, but include them in your decision making and in your activities and what you're doing. The challenge is going to become when it is difficult, because it's easy to deal with people if we are like-minded, but when we are different in seriously and fundamental ways, it creates that challenge of really being open. So this is not easy stuff that we're talking about here. All right. So this gentleman had this quotation there: having a personality of caring about people is important. You can't be a good leader unless you generally like people. This is how you bring out the best in them. An important element here is that whole point of being open and caring, and you have to care about people. It makes no sense if you don't care about somebody to have them in the organization. If they're just a number, All right. It's not going to work. And as a leader, you need to be seen and you need to practice that skill of being caring about people. That I already found this was an excellent quotation from him. And he wasn't always successful. I mean, he failed in a good few of his ventures, until he eventually did Virgin Records and then Virgin Atlantic and all that kind of stuff. So those are some important lessons to be learned along the way. All right, so the last of the three is the doing. So we started with knowing, we went to being, and now we must do. We must act socially responsible. Um, we have to act in that manner consistently and congruently as a participant in our community and on your commitments and passions. Now, what does this mean? We we have to understand what socially responsible behavior is. And that socially responsible behavior has to be a consistent practice throughout an, the organization and congruently. That's the point that we want to talk about. So in all circumstances and in all parallel circumstances, you behave in the same manner all the way through. All right, and that manner has to be, which is high of a high ethical value, that you act upon it in your society, in your community. You act upon that consistently and congruently across the board. Now I know these are kind of similar words, so I'm hoping people understand what we're talking about here. Now, just to be clear, socially responsible, social responsibility is the principle that in addition to pursuing profit generation, corporations should strive to act in a way that is that positively affects society and the world. So if we go back to that definition there, so we're talking about as a leader, whatever we are doing is positive to the entire environment that I'm working with. Now, that is something that if we all had that high level of social responsibility, we'll never litter. We will never put other people in danger with our actions. All right. But we see that social responsibility, being responsible for everybody around us, is not something that is, as I have found in Trinidad, it's not something that we think about first. We think only about, which is kind of like natural human behavior. We think first about my needs and my wants, and we think last about everybody else. I can see this very quickly in the behavior of drivers. I want to be first in line. I want to be able to get home as fast as possible. In the, and I do what I do, and I put everybody at risk by what I do. Speeding, cutting in and out of traffic, driving like a madman over the place. I'm not being socially responsible because I am putting everybody around me at risk. You understand what I'm talking about? It's in a simple um, example of driving. How many drivers we have here in class? Yeah, you can do that. Show them hands.
Yes, sir.
Do you think about how much damage you can do to somebody with that thing that you're dealing with, the driving,
Yes. Yes, sir.
right? And do we consistently behave responsibly when we drive? No, you don't have to answer those questions. It's the point is I need you to to begin that process of thinking about what I do and how I do things and the way in which it's being done across all elements of society. So if we think about it in driving, think about it in other things. What is my behavior like when I'm just walking down the road or when I'm speaking to people? That's what consistently and congruently means. Not only in one type of action I behave in one way or one environment, but I behave the same way congruently in all different types of environments, despite what's taking place, and consistently so. So if in one environment so like think about this. When I'm in public, I'm behaving the same way in public that I do in private. That's consistency. All right, so I'm consistent. So it's not like, behind closed doors we behave a different way. All right, so it's a consistent form of behavior throughout the entire situation. That's difficult, huh? Because that, well, it's a challenge, I should say, that we have. But we always behaving in this way, remembering that we are trying to be positive in ourselves towards the world we're operating in. That's a really critical, important thing for us to pay attention. Now, the social responsibility is something we hear a lot about in relation to corporations, but we have to think about being socially responsible as an individual first. Can't expect corporations to be socially responsible if, as individuals, we are not socially responsible ourselves. So, think about that. And think about the things that you may have done in your life in which you disregarded your social responsibility. All right. So, moving forward. Leadership, however, although we just identified those knowing, being, doing, it's not that we can break the development of leadership development into just step one, step two, step three. It's not an easy thing. Somebody has a question they want to ask. I have mic open. Or did hear mic open. All right. So the process of developing your leadership potential and your leadership is going to be the development of uh, a way of life type of thing. You have to think about it from your development of thinking process, your own value structure, which we call your personal philosophies. Those are things that we are going to ask you. I have asked you all in your if you think about it from the assignments that I've given you, your self analysis, that is to understand who you are. Your leadership developmental plan, that's based upon when we go through all the material, you're going to be evaluating your own leadership potential, your personal philosophy of what is leadership and how leadership works. So that's a key question you all have to tackle all the way. What is leadership to you? That is something that you have to really grapple with and start to really come to grips with in this course. What is leadership? It's not something you could grab and hold, but it's there. You can see it, you can feel it when it takes place, but it doesn't really. It's not something that you could grab hold and measure. It's an intangible thing. Identify core values that can help you work with others towards change. Those are critical things that have to be developed, and they're not just a on and off type of thing. It takes time to develop your skills as you work through the things. All right, developmental process requires a lot of times shifting thinking processes. So it's called paradigm shifting. We'll come back to paradigm shifting in a little bit. So some systems of thinking in the past are just primarily just too simplistic in its approach, and we have to kind of think of things a little differently. So instead of working harder, sorry, we think about working smarter. And when in this process we say working smarter, we're referring to collectively smarter, reflectively smarter, and spiritually smarter. So collectively smarter has to be the most important thing. Um, a lot of leadership programs desist from trying to do this collective smarter thing because the idea is that the I is good leaders don't need anybody else kind of nonsense. But but every time I look at this, I always remember you have to remember that we are smarter than I. You sounds better. That if we think about it collectively, working in groups, though it may be challenging, brings more perspective to a particular issue or problem. And we must take the time to listen to everybody's position, point of view, to be able to come to a better solution. If we only rely on one individual's position, point of view, and information to make a decision, we are hampering ourselves wherein we could have made a better decision if we allowed for the input of more individuals. Now, it's more time consuming, however, and it requires a lot more, um, what's the word I want to use? A lot more diplomacy to get things like that done. But collectively, we are smarter than one of us. All right, just remember that. So that's what we mean by collectively smarter. Reflectively smarter means, and this is something that is not in the nature of our activities of life. Our lives are so hectic that very few times do we really take time to reflect on on what's happening, and evaluate what am I doing, trying to work out what's good, what's bad, what should I keep, what should I throw away. Reflection is a very powerful but oftentimes seldom utilized activities, especially in organizations. Leaders require that they need to be able to reflect on what they've done and make adjustments as they move forward. Because if you do that, you gain better perspective of what's happening and deeper levels of understanding of what's taking place around you. All right? Spiritually smarter means being aware of your core values and principles that you hold closest to you, because those core values are what is going to stay with you when times get rough. So that's what they're referring to there. Being aware of the values, beliefs, and principles that become our rudder in white or rough waters. And these things build our character. Now, if you ever want to know the true nature of an individual, is it would be look at their behavior when things go wrong, as opposed to when things are just hunky dory. When things go wrong, people behave in particular ways that probably, well, not probably, will indicate to you what their true values are. So if somebody is, um, in good times, they're really nice and that kind of stuff. But when stuff goes wrong, they start to they shout at people, they're cussing people, they're lying. That really is a true indication of what their core principles, core values, because those are the things that we hold as being, like, I can't cross this border kind of situation. That those are the things that we have to pay attention to. All right. So I said I want to come back to paradigms. Anybody wants to ask any questions about these three spiritual, reflective, and collective? All right. Any questions? No? All right, let's move ahead. Paradigms, we said, are patterns of looking at things in order to make sense. Question: what is your current leadership paradigm? So, question that you need to be looking at is, how do you look at leadership in your currently? Because at the end of the course, you're going to have to evaluate what your leadership, what your ideas of what is leadership, how they, sorry, in your reflections, you have to look at how they change from the beginning of the course to the end of the course. So, asking yourself this, I'm asking this question as part of your own personal reflections. What do you, when you say leadership, what do you think about? How do you look at leadership? And take a note of that as you move forward. Okay. In terms of the development process, we have to be aware of, oftentimes we need to be making paradigm shifts. So we need to be looking at things and realizing that we are not getting the results we're looking for, and therefore we need to change that pattern of behavior. Now, this is not easily done because the status quo, if you look at the diagram that's there, the status quo is going to want to keep us pulling in one particular direction, because everybody's comfortable with that. But if for whatever reason we are not getting the results we want, then it calls for a change in direction, a change in thinking. All right. So, question would be, what are some examples of paradigm shifts? Let's look at this. Um, so this is the paradigm shift they have put up in the main thing, that leadership is not something a leader possesses so much as a process involving followership. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But let's think about some paradigm shifts um, that you all might have um, um, thinking. Can anybody see where in our society there's a need for us to kind of rethink what's happening, and we can't continue going the same way,
Yeah, so with probably going on the rise in cost of living and stuff.
right? So in terms of how we run our country, right? So that's one. Anything else comes to mind in terms of areas
So
in
how
which?
we deal with crime?
Yeah, okay. Because we seem to be doing the same thing over and over, and we're not getting anywhere fast. What else?
So related to the crime, we can adjust how we deal with
Okay, so I'm losing you. We can adjust how we deal with.
the young people.
Right. Okay. Okay. Elaborate on that last one because it that sounds interesting.
So I think when it comes to the crime, they put it as an issue when they should approach it as you where they should go to the whole communities to get for the young people. That's their thinking or their mind.
Okay. We're not getting very clear reception of you. I mean, um, but I think I got the gist of what you were saying because you're kind of breaking up a bit. Um, all right. Everybody kind of got that, or was I the only one hearing it kind of broken up?
We ain't hear
If you
anything at
could
all, sir.
just, yeah, if you could repeat it, please.
All right. So you should see if you can just repeat in.
Or what she needs to do is talk a bit slower. So when she's talking slower, you'll hear it.
All right.
Just talk
Okay.
faster.
Salvi, you hearing the recommendations?
Yes, sir.
All right.
So
Let's try that.
when it comes to the crime issue, it as a social issue than a crime. So by going to village children, teaching them how to deal with um, different kind of situations, it, it will prevent the crime.
All
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Okay. All right. No problem. I understand what you're talking about in terms of your focus on the youth and in terms of trying to tackle that as one of the sources of crime. All right. Cool. That makes sense. Um, Anybody else wants to add their 2 cents?
So what about moving away from oil and gas in
That's a
terms
huge.
of
We've been talking about that for ages.
yes. So
Mm.
even entering into the new arrangement with Venezuela concerning with the Dragon deal.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at what's happening with the sanctions that America has imposed and given Venezuela a deadline by April, and we still are part of going along with this deal. I mean, things could happen, sanctions could be imposed, and it could mean um, going the wrong in terms of detriment to the economy.
Of course it can. Yes. Um, uh, I have I have a personal peeve with that, and I prefer not to probably bring it in, but I don't I don't particularly like the United States foreign policy in terms of um, what they do. But the unfortunate thing about it is that the impact of their foreign policy is quite powerful. However, the United States is not the only superpower out there anymore. Um, One of the reasons why they have such problems with Venezuela is because I think they would prefer to be able to get their companies back into Venezuela because that's what caused the problem in the first place. When Chavez threw or removed um, the American companies because of the amount of exploitation that was taking place there. It's the same thing that happened with Cuba. So from a very basic point of view, I have a serious disagreement with that, and us having relationships with them.
Me as well, sir.
Yeah, us
I
having
agree with you totally.
right. I mean,
People has always look at it from I guess from the American point of view instead of looking at it from the other side. And remember, the other side just trying to do what's best for their people.
correct.
Remember, right?
Yeah.
So American society always have their best interests at heart, and not
Which is true, and I can
right.
understand why, because because we're still heavily dependent on oil and gas to drive the economy, in terms of the production of power. It's still a very critical resource, and therefore being able to get access to large deposits close at hand is important for the United States because they, um, you know, that assures their supplies and therefore their um, superiority in the production environment and therefore in the international environment. It's just that I kind of gotten fed up with the United States, just telling everybody else you better do what we want or else, I mean they have a very large army and they can make us, do things we don't want to, necessarily,
But they have a very large part in the reason why the world is the
the
way
way
it
it
is
is.
today.
Oh yeah, and they have a huge role to play, from a historic point
Influential
of view.
bullies.
Well, I mean, it didn't just start there. It started from further back. If you look at the European conquest of the so-called New World, you'd realize that all parts of the world were really just, exploited as much as possible to enrich the country of origin of the initial settlers. So, Ms. Rollins, I see your mic is open. You wanted to add something?
No. Well, yes, but no. Go ahead. Go and speak.
All right, I wanted to continue with my slides. That was where I was going to go. But yes, I understand that
Hmm.
paradigm shift you're talking about in terms of us moving away from oil and gas. But you have to ask the question: is one, where are we going to get the resources to make the shift? Because we've already squandered so much of the resources that we earned when we had plenty. Because now that it's running out, now that oil prices are problematic, very unstable, why we haven't done enough to make that diversification movement, and that creates a problem because everybody talks about diversification, about doing this and doing that, but they've never really put enough effort into that movement across the board. I think probably the best time we had was during um, the late 80s when we had no choice but to make those kind of shifts because oil prices were so small or low. We weren't earning much at all, even though we had production going on. All right, so that's a difficult and different discussion. So let's come back to the leadership developmental process. So paradigm shift here. Leadership is not something a leader possesses so much as it's a process of involving followership. And what is followership? Followership is really leadership in action among people in groups. All right, so we come across a new phrase, a new idea here, followership. So we have leadership and followership. Obviously, what they're talking about is the people with whom we have to engage in as leaders, who we refer to as followers. So let's start to look at that in terms of the various types of individuals you find here. Now, I find this diagram, which also came from the textbook, um, kind of gives us an idea if we were to evaluate a group of individuals working on a project. So in this matrix here, we're looking at on the x-axis, we're looking at the performance initiative, that's the ability to do things, and on the y-axis, we're looking at the relational initiative, the ability to communicate, talk, and partner up with people and get things done. So you have people who are high on relationship initiatives and performance initiatives, the table calls them partners. Now, the problem with a partner is that if you're a leader, a partner threatens leaders because they become almost like, well, this person is good enough to be able to is good enough to be able to. Hey, look, somebody put a link in it. Put it in the WhatsApp chat so other people can get it. Excuse me. About Stokely Mike Carmichael, his biography and stuff. Check it out. Put it in the WhatsApp chat. That'll be probably a better place for us to grab it afterwards. Because in this chat, those things will disappear as soon as the class is done. Where was I? What was I doing?
Okay.
Um, so, so partners can in fact challenge leaders because they're just as powerful in the organization, and they're actually people who get things done more so than anybody else. And a lot of leaders don't like partners because they prefer to be able to control them. And we'll see this as an ongoing issue when we're dealing with followership. Um, as opposed to a partner, you have the opposite of a partner of somebody who's a subordinate, which is low relationship initiative and low performance initiative, which means basically without somebody driving them, they're not going to do anything. They're just going to sit back there. They're not going to communicate with anybody else, and they're not going to do anything. A contributor, on the other hand, is high in performance, but poor in the communications part of it. And the politician is high in the communications, but really poor when it comes to initiative and getting things done. Now, if you were as a leader able to analyze the types of people in your group, if you were to kind of work this through, then you'd understand that as a leader, your job is to kind of put these people together to be able to get things done. So partners should really be combined with subordinates so that the partners would have people that they could utilize to help get things done by giving them jobs because they're not going to do anything until people tell them what to do. So partners are usually grouped with subordinates to help them work, to get them to get the work done while they will deal with the relational issues. Right? So they kind of specialize. Similarly, politicians who are good at the relational activity but poor at the performance should be combined with contributors. These are individuals who tend to be more introvert in nature. They're willing to put in the work, but they're unwilling to deal with the communication elements and the networking elements that have to go along with the project. So you combine the contributors with the politicians so you can get the best of the two different skills going on there. So that's one piece of analysis you could look at in terms of analyzing your follow types. And as a leader, it's important that you evaluate the people that you have in your organization with you to be able to get the maximum out of them and not be challenged by and threatened by partners in the organization. Now, this is one model of evaluating leaders. This is another model here. Um, this is from Bridget Hyacinth, and she has this is more looking at leaders in a political environment where you have 7 different types of followers that will tend to coalesce around leadership. And you have spectators, traitors, realists, loyalists, sycophants, critics, and opportunists. Again, once you're able to categorize the individual into one of these bracketed areas, then it becomes important, or it becomes a way in which you can learn how to utilize the individuals to get the best out of them. Because regardless of where they fall into, there are some functionalities that you can get done. Critics, for example, those who are useful because you can get honest answers and honest criticism out of them, um, rather than somebody who might be a sycophant who they are already just going to agree with everything because they just getting what they want, and they're not going to give you critical analysis at all. And that's another element. Again, as a leader, evaluating your followers, putting them into groups, understanding their weaknesses, understanding their strengths is going to be a very important element for a leader to follow. So, what are the responsibility of these followers that we should have, or that leaders have around them? First, they are responsible for offering support to the leader in getting things done. Secondly, we talked about this in terms of being able to take initiative. They can't wait for the leader to tell them what to do. They have to be able to see something necessary to get done and therefore take initiative. Playing counseling and coaching roles. This is both towards each other as other followers and also to the leader. Counsel the leader, especially if the leader needs help working things through, coaching them on different skills or activities that maybe they don't have the necessary skills for. Raise issues and or concerns where necessary. Now, good leaders would encourage this type of behavior from their followers because these um, these things help to make you better, and they hold you to account as well. So seek and encourage honest feedback from the leader. Clarify your role and expectations. Why am I here? What am I expected to do? And those kind of questions are important for followers to be constantly getting clarification and making sure that they are doing what is supposed to be done. Show appreciation both to the leader as well as other followers. It's important because you want to create this atmosphere of everybody's working together with the goal in mind or goals in mind, and they are creating an environment in which it's um, positive to work in. Keeping the leader informed. Anything happens, even if the leader is not around, you need to let them know, hey, XYZ happened, so you better, look out for this and look out for that. And the last one, resist inappropriate influences of the leader. This is one that a few of these things are very challenging because very powerful leaders, as we will refer to as like maybe maximum leadership, these are people who is my way or no other way. They don't like some of these things. They prefer to have their followers um, follow without question. Can you think of any leaders like that? People around you who are in your current experiences who exhibit that type of "you better listen to what I say or else get out of my way" kind of situation. That kind of leadership does not does not encourage um, this type of followership around them. That's a poor thing. All right. The competent in order to meet these responsibilities, these are the competencies that the followers must have. They must have loyalty. They must function well in change-oriented environments. They must function well on groups and teams. They must be able to think independently, and they must consider integrity of the most importance, being the most important thing. All right. The last three things there are probably what uh, strong leaders or maximum leaders don't want. Independent, critical thinking people are the most dangerous people around you because they would literally see through your bullshit. And if you are being ingenuine as a leader, they will call you up on it. And if as a leader you don't want that and you stamp that out, that speaks more about you than them as their followers. All right, and you're probably lacking the integrity necessary to do that. So if those are the kind of competencies and responsibilities that leaders have, is the word follower the best descriptor we can use for them? So, what do you think you could use, or or an alternative that we could look at instead of calling these individuals followers? What suggestions you would make? Nobody. Right. Think of the word partners. Think of the words associates. Think of the words as contributors. Those are some of the words that you can utilize rather than saying, these are my supporters, right? These are my followers. Other people can be really bad and say, these are the sheep. Those are negative things. So these are some of the things that we could look at. This is another model of follower behavior that we will revisit as well. Um, and this has to do specifically with their level of activity on the x-axis and looking at the degree of critical thinking, critical and independent thinking. So you'd see where the sheep fall into, where a lot of leaders like their people to be there. They're passive. They don't do anything unless told to, and they are really, um, they don't even try to think through things in a critical level. On the opposite side of them, you have the yes people who are they're very active in the organization, but they will not even analyze what or even think twice about what the leader is telling them to do. Of course, you have the effective followers who are they are highly active and highly critical thinkers, independent critical thinkers. These are really what you want to have in your organization, more of these people. And then, unfortunately, we have alienated followers who are in an organization who are very critical, very independent thinking, but they have resigned themselves not to do anything in the organization. Now, let's employ this in terms of political analysis. A lot of the population of Trinidad and Tobago, for example, falls into the area of alienated followers because and how does that turn out? That turns out by low when we see low voter turnout. A lot of the voting population is alienated by all the parties that exist in the country because they simply look at it from the position of nobody's different. Everybody's done the same thing. Nobody's coming with any different ideas, nothing. And they become very disoriented and discouraged to participate in the political activities of a country because they're not seeing any alternatives, positive alternatives outside there. How many of you all would agree with that kind of analysis? All right, Andrew.
Agree.
What would you, if you were in a situation and you were in an organization where you found that the vast majority of the people in your organization were feeling alienated, what would you think you'd have to do to try and get them back in? Because those are the most important. Because the sheep and the yes people, you're always going to have those people in the organization. You really need to be taking these alienated people and just motivating them to want to become more effective and active in the organization. Um, the question will be is how how can you do it? And it begins with the whole process of listening to what they want and how they want to get things done. All right, so now we spoke about different circumstances requiring different leadership styles. So these are the these are the systems of leadership that exist there. The classical, laissez-faire, autocratic, participative. You all should have come across these before if any of you all did management studies, but laissez-faire means very laid back, how it hang its swing, whatever happens, hey, yeah, man, that good, man. We could work with that. Autocratic is my way or the highway. Participative is where encouraging everybody to get involved with the decision making as a leader. Those are the classical situation. Situational leadership has to do with leadership that emerges based upon the circumstance or situation that presents itself. That's going to be an important. Emergent would be people within an organization who emerge in the organization as a leader in that particular thing based upon their journey through the organization. Transactional would be leaders who utilize a transactional approach to getting things done. So you want to get this done, so you trade off, hey, you get some bonuses for getting that done, so on. Transformational leaders are those who utilize high levels of motivation, selling a um, selling an idea to individuals and encouraging them to want to take the journey in making the change necessary. And visionaries, of course, are those leaders who have the capacity, a style of leadership which they the image of the future is going to be the most critical and important thing that they're looking at. So these are different styles of leadership. And you all are going to actually debate transactional and transformational, but we're going to come across more details of them moving forward. So, who's a leader? Any person who's actively engaged with others to accomplish some form of change. Now, I took out the word positive because over time we've had various leaders who got involved with other people to accomplish change, but the change is not always necessarily going to be positive. So we have to understand those particular circumstances or situations that come up. So, what is the purpose of leaders? Leaders are responsible for motivating people. They, their focus has to be on the attainment of the organization's goals, be them um, from an entrepreneurial perspective or from a social perspective, whatever the goals of the organization are, the leaders' responsibilities to actually make those goals. Ensure that rules are adhered to, so you have to be, through your own example, make sure that you don't break rules and you follow the rules of the organization. Provide continuity and momentum. We'll speak to that in other times, but basically, when, especially in positions or times of when organizations are making change, continuity is critical because especially if the change is kind of traumatic in the organization, continuity of moving from one version of the past to a version of the future, it can be a challenging thing. So there's a need for a leader to create continuity, but also, which means, reminding of people where you came from. But you also have to do things to maintain momentum moving forward towards the positive change that you're trying to get to. That momentum is also part of the responsibility of the leader. Embrace and foster change. Well, kind of goes with the other one above. If you as a leader don't embrace and foster change, nobody else is going to do it. Let's put it that way. All right. You're looking after the common good of everybody around you. You are being socially responsible. We spoke about what that is. As a leader, you are also going to be engaging in civic engagement and being having civic responsibility. So those are things we're going to look at in a little more detail as we move forward. So we talked about this. Social responsibility is a commitment to the well-being of people, the world, and the environment around us. Simple things like, making sure you don't litter, not speeding, um, looking after the environment around you, not throwing your rubbish in the neighbor yard, dumping your garbage and there are a host of things that we do that sometimes are just not socially responsible to the environment around us. Civic engagement means that the leader has to have a heightened sense of responsibility for all of the communities, not only um, the one community where he's the leader. All right, so he might be a leader at the work in the work environment, but he also plays a part in the social environment that he finds himself living in, the family environment that he finds himself working in, living in, and the wider community that he's engaged with. Um, so a lot of you, how many of you here actually participate or work in or take part in community activities where you live? Anybody? Mm-hmm. Right. I just want to show a hand. One person. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. Two. That giving back to community thing is a really important element. And you don't have. All right, cool. Good few of you. That's not bad. And in terms of a community, it could be like, for instance, in church. You could do work in church, and you engage with other people in your church environment. Um, Again, the community centers and that type of stuff. There's stuff to the. Ms. Rollins, you wanted to say something? Add something? See,
No, sorry.
I
It
saw your
was in
hand up.
response to your question.
Right, yeah, I know what it was, but I just saw your hand stay up, so I was wondering. So
All right, sorry.
forms of civic engagement refer to civic action, civic commitment or duty, civic skills, and social cohesion. So civic action or participation in activities such as volunteering, self-service. So these are the kind of things I'm talking about: civic commitment or duty, willingness to make positive contributions to your society that you operate in, civic skills, the ability to be involved in civil society, politics, and democracy. So yes, you can go to political speeches and take part and vote and that type of stuff, but you do it in a manner that it is respectful of other people's opinions and positions. Social cohesion, a sense of reciprocity, trust, and bonding with others. Those are things that these become the civic engagement elements that I'm talking about. Civic responsibility, a sense of personal responsibility that individuals should feel to uphold their obligations as part of any community. So that's things like this. Any of you all here ever did jury duty? Um, as teachers, we're not supposed to. Well, we're not eligible to do jury duty. Something interesting though. Going to school, all of you all should be doing that, right? And actions required by law. That's the duty. Um, Obeying the law, paying taxes. Your responsibility. Actions that the citizens should take: community service, voting, service in the military. Now, this one's kind of real American, right? Service in the military, displaying patriotism. The problem is one person's patriotism is another person's thing, but understand that some of these things are they are part and parcel of what we refer to as civic responsibility. All right, voting being one that a lot of people have problems with sometimes. Participating in the community. The military element is not something that we do here, but any of you are part of the cadets, brownies, girl guides, those kind of organizations as you were growing up, 4-H club or any of those kind of things, Lions or Leos, that type of stuff. Jada, what were you?
Brownie.
A what? Sorry,
A brownie.
a brownie. Okay, okay. Um, that's good. All right, so those are the kind of things you can get up to in terms of that, right? Okay, so next question we should ask here is: should a leader know everything? Obviously, anybody wants
Of
to answer?
course not, sir.
Of course not, because that will be absolutely impossible. However, there are lots of leaders who believe this. There are lots of people who believe this as well. That if you're going to be a leader, you need to know everything about what you're leading. That's absolutely impossible and ridiculous to be expected. Now, this therefore requires that even as a leader yourself, you can't believe that you should know everything. It means that you have to develop as a leader an openness to learning and not just learning by yourself, but an openness to learning with everybody else. That's why we have all of us are smarter than one of us. How many of you all have ever participated? Well, I can give you my example here. I remember when we were doing a lot of training, the head of my department used to come down and be part of the training with us. In fact, to this day, whenever we're doing any kind of brush up training or additional training, the head of the department will come down and sometimes the president will come down and join us in the class as a student and learn with us. That develops a very interesting relationship and dynamic between leaders and followers in organizations because we're all leveling the playing field and being open with each other in terms of a learning environment. Together, we're going to learn this new thing. Be a new piece of software, a new approach to different things. It's important that we do that because it helps to bring us together closer and tie into the objectives of the organization. Those are kind of a really important techniques that we can use. All right. The whole group, including the leader, needs to make sure that the environment that we're creating is open to learning, making mistakes, and sharing knowledge. If you're working in an environment where you're open to learning, but if you make a mistake, you get punished, that's not going to encourage people wanting to participate in learning activities because part of learning is failure. I mean, a lot of people don't like that truth, but the fact of part of learning requires that we make mistakes and we fail, because through our failures we learn and we become better at what we're doing. You understand? And as we go through that process, we share with each other that hey, I tried it this way and it didn't work, and then I tried it this way and I've got this to work. That give and go kind of situation is really important as a leader, and the leaders have to be important, to realize that they have to encourage this leadership exercise, this willingness to learn, and not be this reservoir of all knowledge in the world, kind of. So this is the learning model that came out of the text itself. What this is really telling us is that for you to be able to do anything, all three elements of your focus, your will, and your capacity need to come together, to be able to do things. All right. So it's just the nature. Another learning model is this one here, um, where you think about something. This is the conceptualization process. You apply it, you evaluate the experience through reflection, you make critical decisions, and probably reconceptualize. You understand? Go back through the process until you get to the point where that idea or concept becomes accepted through testing, um, as existing theory, and which is then applied in the environment around us. Now, if any of you all are familiar with this, this is referred to as the scientific method. You all have met this before? The scientific method, the radiology folks, sociology folks would have met this. Anybody who has done a social science should have come across the scientific approach, which is you start with a hypothesis, you set up an evaluation, and you apply it. You evaluate the findings from your thing, and you either make changes to correct the issues, or um, it proves itself to be correct, and then it goes into existing theory and is applied in the world around us. All right, but just to let you know that learning is a lot like that as well. The most effective organizations or communities that exist in the world are what are referred to as learning environments. It means that the environment that you're in understands that the world is dynamic, and they are going to always engage in constant lifelong learning. Now, if you think about COSTAT as an institution of that nature, you'd recognize that we have set ourselves up as a lifelong learning organization. And it's actually, if you look at our vision and mission statement, it's actually written there that we are designed to create in our students people who understand the need for lifelong learning, because it's only through that process of learning that we remain vital and renewed. I mean, it gets stale so fast it's not funny. So it's important that leaders do that. Another method, or one of the more critical forms of learning that we want to pay attention to, is experiential learning. One of the strongest ways to learn something is by through the experiences we've had with it. All right, so let's look at this here. We come to new information in one of two ways: by doing something, which is an experience, or by thinking about it, which is conceptualization, abstract. Now, once we understand that, then that brings that that abstract conceptualization might not be like, for instance, if I remember carefully, um, Miss Rollins spoke about not doing well in school, and it's probably because Miss Rollins. Have you ever done learning style inventory evaluation?
Learning style.
The VARC learning style evaluation.
No, I don't think so.
Really? Okay. Well, there's the link in the e-classroom to do it. Jump on the link and do it, and as part of your own personal thing. One of the things that we,
Oh, VARK.
yeah,
Yes.
the VARC, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I
Okay.
have.
Did you come up as kinesthetic?
Um, every time I do it, I get something
Different?
slightly different, but
Yeah.
more or less, I I learn by experiencing, working every
Kinesthetic.
day.
The K.
Yes, sir, I
Okay,
was
that's good.
kinesthetic. I was
Right.
kinesthetic as well.
Right. Now, the problem is our entire education system sits upon the primary methodology is read write. All right? Read, write, and listen, auditory. But for somebody who has a preference for um, kinesthetic, concrete experiences are more important and the better way for that individual to learn. So in a lot of instances, many of our students go into our education system hampered because they are their preference is kinesthetic learning, but the system is designed in oral and written focuses of teaching. So there's a mismatch between the learning preference and the teaching styles. And that creates that gap in the education system, which is why you have such a large fallout. So what Salvi was talking about in addressing the fallout in youth in particular, because that discontentment then runs into the whole situation there. Hi, Rihanna. Oh, you were here earlier. Okay. All right. Um, right. So that whole issue of of falling into that kinesthetic hole where you want to do things to learn, but you've been forced to read and listen and hear, and it's not making that connection. Lots of boys in particular tend to fall into that area, but um, it is one of the most important methods of learning in terms of being kinesthetic. All right, so when we process that information, either by reflecting on that information, which is reflective observation, or by applying that information, it's called active experimentation. That's how we go about learning things. So this diagram here kind of represents that whole situation of the concrete experience, observation and reflection, conceptualization, active experimentation. It's sort of like learning a practical skill. You want to learn how to put tiles down, you have to do it. You can't sit down and think. Yes, you can conceptualize what you're going to do, make all your preparations, but you have to actually do it to be able to learn and experience the activity as a learned activity. That kind of makes sense, guys? So it's the same thing that we're going to be talking about with leadership. The only way for you to really learn leadership is through experiential experiences, all right, or experiential opportunities, which is what this course is going to set up in itself for you to take the opportunity and give you opportunities to experience leadership, and therefore hopefully that will help you to help develop some of the skills um, that comes up. So this quotation here: leadership is a role open to anyone. Leadership is living by a personal set of values in which you motivate others to do the right thing, be engaged in the world, and to listen to others and their concerns. Leadership is focused on the other person. This is a quotation from the close of the textbook in terms of what they felt leadership was all about. So the point I'm trying to make to you is that this course has a lot of fundamentals, and we want to get you to the point where you are going to be wanting to take up leadership positions, wanting, all right? You and I can be and should be leaders. And I want you all to be looking at it. So we've just sort of introduced the entire concept of the relational leadership model. In the next chapter, we are going to be looking at that's after Carnival, right, guys? Yeah, next week, Monday is Carnival Monday. So on the 19th, I'll be seeing you all again. So on the 19th, we will begin to look at the origin of leadership thinking. And then in the last chapter, we're going to be looking at the relational leadership model in a lot more detail. All right. So, any questions people want to ask tonight on what we took place here? Any comments you want to make? Hope you kind of got the gist of what the introduction is all about.
I want to ask a question about the teaching session.
The teaching,
So
oh yes. Mm-hmm.
what we will be teaching is what is occurring in these next few weeks in February.
Yes, you're going to be teaching this specific chapter you've been assigned.
Okay.
Right? So you remember the chapter you got? Um,
Yeah,
your
I
chapter,
remember it. Yes.
right? So your presentation three, right?
Hmm.
Along with Miss Gonzalez
Michael,
and
Mackenzie.
Mr. Michael, right? Yeah. So one of the things
So
I
that
would
is
recommend.
those. Mhm.
Go ahead.
It's coming up in February, so it's not coming up in the beginning of March, and then we'll be scrambling to make a teaching presentation for the 11th of March.
Is it that you're scrambling already?
Well, it's I don't want to be in that position
Right. Your
where
presentation
it's
is
something we'll be
scheduled.
covering.
Your presentation is scheduled for the 11th of March.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, you all have time after I finish presenting chapters one to three. Today is the first day. Then we have the 19 and 27. You all have time to
Right.
go through chapter and make your preparations to teach the chapter that you're going to learn. Again, it's
Okay.
the same thing we just
Yeah.
spoke about, right? We said that
Hmm.
you have to have the experience of taking leadership positions, and this is the first one. All right. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. For one other question, sir. Concerning the stuff we're supposed to do in the e-classroom. When I went and do it, right? Because as I told you, I did I was kinetic or whatever, and
You
then
kinesthetic, yeah.
kinesthetic, right? And then it have the other one with like ENTP and all these kind of things,
Right, yeah.
right? It didn't have like if you get two X's before the TP, so I am XXTP, and it didn't have
XXTP?
yeah, and it didn't have an explanation um as
As
to
to
what
what
that is.
probably I that's the learning style evaluation you're talking about. This one here.
No, but that one wasn't the learning style. That one was the type of
Personality type?
individual. Pardon?
Personality type?
Yeah, personality type. Yeah.
Well, that's a different one. We'll go through that when we get to understanding self. All right?
Okay, sir, no problem. Yeah.
You're on the camera. Yeah, I'm coming on. All right. Okay, guys. Any other questions people want to ask? All right. Well, that's it for me tonight. Let me stop here. I want to thank you all for coming on and be. I know it's carnival next week. Just be careful, guys. Be safe and have an enjoyable time frame. All right. All right. I'm going to stop
Yes,
the
sir. Have a
recording
good
now.
night.
All right. Good night, everybody.